Tell us in terms of the issue of overeating of sugar and what you've seen in terms of the health repercussions that is having, particularly with children, because we are very passionate as well about the effect of sugar on children's health. What do you say about that?
Well, it's a primary driver of all learning disorders and all diagnoses that most children are coming in with. So one, I have a real problem with the pediatric and psychiatric approach of diagnosing and medicating children without ever running a single lab or doing a single brain image. I think it should be malpractice that you can diagnose and treat an organ that you've never looked at or measured. So every psychiatric or learning disorder is a brain issue. And yet a pediatrician or a psychiatrist can prescribe a highly addictive psychiatric drug that will alter brain development, mood, sleep, eating habits, growth development, is addictive. You will habituate and attenuate to that drug. Known fact. These are cocaine and amphetamine derivatives. The number one street drug in America is Adderall and Ritalin. So they sell it on college campuses and high school. It's the number one street drug here. It's prescription ADHD drugs. All right. Now, why is that? Because cocaine makes everybody focus better. If I took cocaine, which is Ritalin, I would focus better. Duh. I mean, that's what it does. So, is the kid really cocaine deficient or methamphetamine deficient? I don't think so. So they don't look at the brain. They don't do like a QEEG or a SPECT scan. You could. I do them. You can see right away, is it attention deficit? Is it anxiety? Is it low energy? What is it, right? They don't run any labs. They don't look at, is it just zinc deficiency? Can the kid not make any dopamine because they don't have enough zinc? Are they having anxiety because they can't make any GABA because they don't have any zinc? Zinc is the number one mineral deficiency I see in all mental health issues. Second to that is magnesium. We test for it. We look at it. You can tell. It's not hard. None of this. The brain really only has like 12 to 15 things you need to care about. It's a sequestered area. There's a blood-brain barrier designed to keep things separate. The brain makes all its own cholesterol. The cholesterol floating around in your blood does not go to your brain. This is not how it works. And I don't think people know how the body works. And if the brain ain't right, nothing else is right. Okay? I take a top-down approach. I try to get the brain, the central nervous system, which is controlling everything, working right. And sure enough, your big toe ends up knowing how to function if I deal with this. Okay? So talking about food and nutrition, children are being poisoned to death. They're being fed garbage, empty calories, right, in the form of sugars and fructose. Fructose is metabolized, fruit juice and fruit stuff, that's what that is exactly like giving a child alcohol as far as its liver is concerned. Fructose is thought of in the body as a poison. Poisons must go to the liver to be dealt with and addressed. Glucose does not do that. So you have sugar from some glucose just goes in the blood now. You're only supposed to have a teaspoon of glucose floating around your body at all times in your bloodstream. 1 teaspoon. How many teaspoons of sugar are in a donut, are in a juice, are in a candy bar, are in pizza, are in bagels, are in croissants? Tablespoons upon tablespoons. So when the bloodstream gets full of beyond the teaspoon, it's seen as a medical emergency to the body. So everything has to stop, so it has to deal with it. So that's just an overview, but let's talk about how a baby develops. Let's talk about a baby. I had a baby in my belly come out of me. Okay, he's 18 now. What happens in the human body? What is going on? I'm feeding that child right through my placenta for a long time. And it's swimming around in a sea of salt water. Okay. Comes out, finally has to, which is the weirdest thing, that we like live in water for like 10 months. Don't you think that's the wildest stuff?
I'm a midwife, yes.
A fish, and then we come out and breathe air. And there's this whole like weird thing that has to go on. Like, what? I'm like, so strange. I'm fascinated. Like, this is how we did it. Why was this a good idea for a mammal? And we're all the same, right? So anyway, I constantly, it's the weirdest design. So we come out, and what is that baby designed to do? If we're in the wild and Luke was my husband or whatever, he my baby daddy, if I drop dead, the baby's going to die because Luke can't do anything for that baby. He can't. It's dying like, well, if she can't make it and there's not some other woman with some milk coming out of her breasts, the baby's done because he can't do anything about it, right? So I'm built and ready to feed that baby. I breastfed my son for 3 years. You know what my breast milk has? Perfect nutrition for a developing brain.
Correct.
What is the breast milk? A bunch of medium chain fatty acids, slightest little bit of glucose, and a bunch of cannabinoids, actually, CBD. Okay? Bunch of fat, medium chain fatty acids. What it is breast milk? Highly ketogenic. Infants are on a ketogenic diet, extreme ketogenic. They're in deep, incredible ketosis. Why? Because the brain loves ketones. The brain and the heart prefer to use ketones, which are a byproduct of metabolizing fat, medium chain fatty acids, more than anything else. They do not prefer to run on sugar. We keep 1 teaspoon available. That's it. For quick, fast, immediate energy, rapid processing. Yes, the brain uses glucose. It also uses fatty acids and ketones. And there's there's a few parts of the brain, but let me just break it down really simple. I'm not sure if viewers will see this. Inside here, my hand is like the emotional limbic, we say lizard brain, but primitive emotional. I think it's beautiful because it's fear, fight or flight, survival, all this other, but it's also falling in love. Okay, so let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater right here. I like the emotional brain. However, because falling in love is a stupid thing to do, so it's in there with emotions. Like, this is not a smart idea to fall in love with this asshole and have sex, and nothing's logical about it. So it's put in the irrational place. Otherwise, we would never do it. All right. So this top here, that's the cortex. That's the rational prefrontal, the whole cortical part of us that takes up until about 26 years old to develop. And why kids do dumb things is because they don't have this integrated, like in a lot of 40-year-old men too. I'm like, what are you doing? Can you bring your brain back online? So this top cortical part loves fatty acids and ketones. This part loves sugar. So if I flood the body with sugar, flood the brain with sugar, it's very hard to bring your cortex online. It's going to override because now I've just activated. So what does all the sugar do to a child? Activates their limbic system, their emotional, manipulative, explosive, panicky, fight and flight, fear, type of brain. So they don't think well. They have no choice. You did it to them. Trying to ask them, calm yourself down. Was that a good decision? Trying to make them sit in a classroom and listen or study something that requires, future planning, impulse control. They can't do it. And you did it to them. So as soon as we feed that baby the first food, and if you make it be rice cereal or some cereal or a French fry or a bite of your donut, you flip them from a ketogenic state, deep ketosis, and you flip them into now a sugar burner. And they're going to stop burning primarily that, and they're going to activate a different part of the brain. You're going to change development. So the first food anybody should be giving their baby is like a raw egg yolk, salmon eggs, raw salmon roe or caviar, fish or beef, something like that. First perfect foods, because you will keep them in deep ketosis and you're feeding what the brain is, more fat, medium chain fatty acids, cholesterol, and saturated fat. A human brain is 70% animal cholesterol and saturated fat. So the first food, they should never be a plant, should never be applesauce. It's the dumbest first food to ever give a baby. And it's even dumber to give them fruit because it's fructose and it must go to the liver and it's metabolized like alcohol in an adult. But they can't process it the same way. It has to be dealt with. It changes what goes on in their bloodstream and it causes inflammation instantly. But no one's taught that. And their pediatricians are telling them fruit juice, applesauce, rice cereal, instead of the primary proper human diet, which is animal-based. What every indigenous tribe on the earth for thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years have all eaten is an animal-based diet with very little plants. Plants were used as medicine. in small amounts.
And what would you say was the kind of the biggest thing that happened to you in terms of really focusing on good nutrition for yourself? Was there one specific thing that you did, or was there a combination of things that you did?
So I think the biggest thing that I did was, instead of trying to restrict and tell myself you can't eat this or you can't have that, I started to incorporate a lot more fruits and vegetables into my meals, just so that it would satisfy me and that I wouldn't have room for other, things that I was eating before. I will say that I had a relatively decent diet, but looking back now, I definitely consumed more sugar than, I do now. And also, I consumed a lot more dairy and gluten and things like that, which I do try to avoid as much as possible now. And I noticed just huge improvements, after I was doing that.
Oh my goodness, we can certainly echo that.
Yes, similar to what we've done.
Yeah,
Over the
absolutely,
years. Yeah.
absolutely. And in terms of kind of the things that you have most seen sort of benefits, what sort of food groups would you say, apart from the fruits and vegetables, are there any recipes that you said that this one has just been my godsend lifesaver recipe that's just like picked me up?
That's a great question. So I will say that I do have a very big sweet tooth, and I always have. So when you asked me to be a part of this, I was super excited because I felt like I had a connection to it. But a lot of my recipes are sweeter. However, I don't use any refined sugar in any of my recipes. I like to sweeten them with raw local honey or pure maple syrup or ripe bananas or things like that. So most of my recipes are geared towards the sweeter side and desserts, but I do have one favorite that a lot of people have made and loved. They're my no-bake raw carrot cake truffles, and they are absolutely delicious. They've got, obviously the carrots, they've got walnuts in them, a lot of spices. Dates is what I use as the primary ingredient to sweeten them. And then they are covered in a cashew vanilla glaze that's sweetened with some raw honey or maple syrup, and they are just divine. So that's probably my favorite recipe that I've shared, and it was actually one of the very first recipes I shared, which is so interesting. And I shared it again somewhat recently, and people have just loved it. So it's been fun seeing everyone's recreations of them.
So you do eat your plants, and would you say you're careful with you're saying you're not having any refined sugar, and you know that our bugbear in this show is sugar.
Right.
So tell us about your approach to that, and also how you talk to your patients about the effect of sugar and refined foods and super refined foods in their diet.
Right. So there's a ton of stuff wrong with sugar. Sugar is horrible. And basically, humans eat until they get enough protein, and only then do they stop eating. Any food that you originally had, like the sugar beet or the sugar cane, is actually maybe, 10, 12% protein. But you suck all that out. You suck out all the protein, the fiber, the water. You're left with just sugar. It's just pure carbohydrate. This is bad. So you're gonna have to eat sugar forever and still won't get any protein out. Sugar also has this super high energy density. It's the highest energy density carbohydrate you can get. Humans eat a certain weight and volume of food daily, almost independent of the calories in there. You're basically going to eat, a kilo and a half of food every day. And if we double the calories in that by putting a bunch of sugar in there, you're going to eat double the calories. You're just eating satiety. You're just basically eating a certain weight and volume. Your brain's guessing when you had enough. And then you're also responding to the amino acids in your bloodstream that give you satiety. But you're just eating to get this weight and volume. If we give you something with tons of sugar in it, you might eat twice as many calories. Finally, you've got this hedonics, right? If you combine a high energy density carb and fat together, you're just going to overeat it. That's the way humans are wired. I mean, that actually kept us alive when we were hunter-gatherers. If you came across some honey or some fruit or something with a really high energy density carb or fat or both, you're going to binge eat that because that's going to keep you alive in the winter and during the famine and when there's nothing to eat. So this is kind of normal Homo sapien behavior. And so there are all these reasons why sugar's bad. It's completely devoid of protein and dilutes other things that have protein in them. That has absolutely no fiber or water. It's completely dehydrated, and therefore it contributes almost nothing to weight and volume of food, which gives you satiety. And so it's worsening satiety per calorie by adding calories without any satiety. And then finally, the hedonic piece is usually high energy density carb and fat together, like donuts or pizza or candy bars. And sugar is half of that equation. So it's bad. Now, unfortunately, refined fat is the flip side of that coin and is just as bad. And I could go on a rant about that, which we might save that for the seed oil podcast instead of the sweet liberation.
I come from a healthcare background, although I haven't been practicing in our healthcare system in the UK for a number of years. But, again, really dumbfounded by some of the misinformation. And I was very, very blessed, I have to say, opposite clinical experience to you, working in an outstanding unit in London where actually a lot of research was happening on diabetes, type 2 diabetes, gestational diabetes. And so we were talking to our patients and our women to tell them to kind of eat a kind of a more restricted carbohydrate diet, not a massively low carbohydrate diet, but they would measure, say, look, no more than 8 tablespoons or 2 tablespoons of rice, and then make everything else green vegetables and good protein and good fats, talking about adding butter and cheese and things like that, just to get that, that insulin spike to stop. And I thought every other unit in the country was doing that. And then I've since found out by being told stories of, and I kid you not, an actual diabetic nurse telling a diabetic patient there is no relationship between food and diabetes. I was like that. And so, yeah, unbelievable, isn't it?
It's ridiculous. And when I worked in the hospital unit, I found it very interesting, talking. And first of all, I want to say nurses are absolutely incredible. I could not be a nurse.
Yes.
Holy cow. Some of the things that they deal with are amazing humans. But often when, the nurses would get you deliver trays, they would have to give the patient insulin before they ate. And I would even talk to, I would say, wouldn't it just make more sense? And they would say, oh yeah, like it's almost like people knew and appreciated it, but to some degree, but it was just not what we were going to do. It wasn't what patients were actually ever going to follow, type of thing. So I do think, like you said, I think there's such a misinformation around what humans need to eat. And the amount of garbage that is out there is, I can't imagine, I often think about, like, what if you had a severe, like, alcohol addiction or drug addiction, and everywhere you went, you were offered, like, a beer. Like, hey, like, here's an example of sugar. Like, I'm a sports fan, literally looking at sports on my phone. I get an ad for macaroni and cheese. I'm driving past the gas station. There's a banner. You go into the gas station. I have to take my dog who's had surgery. Our vet has a free, like, mocha machine thing. I had to pick up some air filter at Home Depot, a hardware store. They have Coca-Cola. Like, it's everywhere. And I think as a society, we've started to think and embrace that we wouldn't have these things. They wouldn't be provided to us if they were truly dangerous for us. And we're also such a quick, instant gratification, quick society. Now with Amazon, if something takes more than like a day to get here, I'm like, where is it? I can Google something in 30 seconds. And so the fact that I used this kind of thought process the other day with a young woman I was talking to. I said, if you saw your 4-year-old about to drink bleach, how fast would you run to knock it out of her hand? And she said, I don't care if I had to pull a hamstring, I would knock it out of her hand. And I said, if you saw a 4-year-old drinking Coca-Cola, you running that fast? Because even if it causes the same or worse, damage over time, we don't fully appreciate and embrace that like we do something that's immediate. And that's partially human nature. We're never going to be like that. But my goal, my hope is that people really start looking at what they're eating every single day, is just how this is going to come around and impact you. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I've been a dietitian since 2009. And let's just say even 5 years ago, I'm seeing children younger with type 2 diabetes. The youngest person I've seen was 8. When I was in high school, we used to call it adult onset diabetes.
Correct.
And now it's, 8. My second oldest sister, I have 3 older sisters, is a surgeon. They are having more problems and complications in surgery because people cutting through more fat layers. Think about cutting a steak. If you cut the fat, it kind of wiggle. You just straight through muscle, it's fat. Think about how much more difficult this is. We're seeing people with heart disease. I saw the youngest person I've ever seen with the O2 saturation of 60 and congestive heart failure. He was 27. So this isn't, people are getting sicker younger. And so this is why, people are like, oh, whatever, when I'm 90, no, this is happening. This is a problem. And so the best thing we can do, in my opinion, is if you're a parent, like, lead by example. If you're a young person, like, start getting those habits. Because we know if you start habits now, you're going to be so much more likely to continue them.
Oh my goodness, we're talking about dyes and artificial. What about the elephant in the room? What about sugar? Refined carbohydrate. So where do you sit with sugar on your dietary approach that you use with your clients?
Right. Listen, I don't have a ban on anything. Like, anyone who does these, like, no sugar detoxes for 20 days, like, that's not a sustainable situation. My take on sugar, I think fruit is our nature's candy, and we should be giving our kids lots of fruit. And I always have frozen grapes in the fridge, and I always have apples, and I always have plums. And I really hope my kids continue to lean on fruit and bananas as a means of curbing a sweet tooth in a very productive way that gives you energy and has fiber and has nutrients. So big in choosing fiber-filled, fruit when having a sweet tooth. I do eat sugar sometimes. I don't cut it all out. I believe you can treat, not cheat. If you have some sugar, it's a treat, it's not a cheat. You move on with your life. But at the same time, we have to discuss the elephant in the room, which is the more sugar a person eats, the more sugar a person craves. So we can't just say all sugar in moderation, because for me, at this stage of my health journey, I can have sugar, I can enjoy it, and I can move on. But early on, when I treated sugar as a means of, coping with emotional distress, and because it does release dopamine in the brain and does give you a high, like, for me, for a long time, I had to just kind of cut away from it and not even try to have it in moderation. And early on, I did have to separate myself from it a little bit more intensely in order to understand my emotions and understand my behaviors and my self-awareness. And now I work it in really well. And I don't think anyone ever has to do like a full cutout. And I don't think I ever particularly did, but it wouldn't be fair to people if I didn't share that, like, there was a point early on in my journey where I did need to say, like, I'm a little allergic to desserts. Like, I just had to step away because I found that every time I ate them, I craved them more. And I kept eating them for the wrong reasons. And I kept eating them very rushed and like it was the end of the world. And, now it's very mindful. It's very planned for. It's very, enjoyable, but I wasn't always there. So I think everyone has to have a lot of self-awareness with their relationship with sugar and do what they need to do. I don't think you need to keep a lot of candy in your house. I don't think you need to keep a lot of cookies in your house on the counter. So if you do have cookies or candy in your house, try to make it a little out of sight, out of mind, like put it on a higher shelf, so we can keep it balanced. Because, there's this idea that we should be very neutral with food with kids, right? So, and I was always taught this before I had my own kids, right? Becoming a dietitian, that you should give your kids dessert at the same time you give them broccoli, so you don't make them feel like the dessert is the reward and the broccoli is the chore, and we should be very neutral. And that's great in theory, but society isn't neutral about sweets. Society makes them neon green and sugar coated and has more commercials for the candy than it does the broccoli. And so candy is on a big pedestal, and there's so much more money pumped into the marketing of it to make it more exciting with figures and so forth. So it's not as easy to moderate as people say it is. And so, I have this line I have this one expression, and I find that my most successful clients really cling on to this, which is you got to know yourself, not test yourself. And I always say, you got to know yourself, don't test yourself. And so again, I do eat sugar and all these things, but I don't have like tons of chocolate chip cookies just lining my counter, because if I did, I don't know how successful I would be, right? So even a dietitian who's been practicing this for so many years, like I'm not above insight in mind. If it were insight, I'd be eating a lot more of it. So I think everyone has to set themselves up for success, right? You know, setting their environment up with lots of healthy things, have, you know, flavored teas on the counter or flavored sparkling waters or a bowl of fresh fruit, and maybe use stevia or monk fruit to sweeten your, you know, your coffee rather than artificial sweeteners or syrups that just lead you down the path of having out of control sugar craving.
I think, well, in the UK, I don't think there's that much difference actually about what goes on between our side and your side. I mean, there are, you know, all of the normal regulations around foods. There's quite a lot of control over what's going into foods. One of the things actually, one of my bugbears actually is the amount of foods that are sneaking sugar in. And there's, you know, it might be guacamole or something, or hummus or something like that.
Yeah.
And you go, well, hang on a minute. 5 years ago, this didn't have sugar in it. Why have we suddenly got to have 2% sugar? That was actually mayonnaise, wasn't it, Nabila? We went to a restaurant and they brought mayonnaise out, and I thought, and I tasted it, and I thought, oh, this is weird. And I looked at the pack, and they put 2% sugar into it. It's just
but it's addicting. Sugar is more addicting than a lot of drugs.
right.
So they put these ingredients in that are addicting, so we keep coming back for more and more and more.
Ah, yes, yes. It probably makes you eat more at the time as well.
Yep.
You're in the restaurant, you've got extra space for more, more food.
Yep.
Oh,
Well, it is. And what do you? Because you know, our bugbear is the amount of sugar people are eating. And as we came into this journey, we did not expect to go down so many rabbit holes. the rabbit holes are just like endless. We just get lost in them, because when you uncover one thing, you uncover another and another and another. It's just endless. So, we when we started this journey, we were both like keen. Let's cut out sugar. Let's talk about this. But then you start uncovering all of these other issues that happen in health. And that's just the beginning. The beginning has to be there, because you can't keep poisoning yourself with this really, really terrible food product. And then you open up the rest. So let's talk about nutrition and how you see kind of nutrition playing out. What do you talk to your patients and about, and how do you approach this? Are you tailoring nutrition for each one, or do you have a very kind of approach that you have sort of created around nutrition?
Yeah, both. I mean, I really try and meet the patient where they're at. I do a lot of hormones, and a lot of women are struggling with weight loss. So obviously nutrition plays a huge role in that. But again, it's about the awareness factor first. So I usually ask them to maybe track foods for a few days so I can actually see what we're starting with. And then I can meet them where they're at. And it's like, all right, instead of, 1 egg this morning, let's increase that to 2 or 3. We really want to focus on protein. Most women are under eating protein. It's just our nature. We don't eat a lot of protein. We like carbohydrates, which carbs are good in moderation. We need them, but we really need to focus on protein. I'm not a huge fan of diets and of adhering to like a strict meal plan. But if you just learn the basics, which again, nobody really teaches us, is, making sure that you have adequate protein, you have adequate healthy fat, and you have adequate fiber on your plate. That's a really well-balanced meal. It doesn't sound that difficult, and anyone can do that. It's like, all right, I have protein here, I have fat, and I have a good fiber source. Fiber is essential for health, and most everyone is under eating fiber. We only get maybe about 10 to 15 grams a day. We need upwards of like 25 to 30. And that's not only important for, healthy bowel movements and, keeping you full and balancing blood sugar, but also for your hormones. Fiber binds to estrogen, so it can help us metabolize it out of the body. And a lot of women have excess estrogen, which is causing a lot of hormone imbalances. And the excess estrogen in the body is highly influenced by the toxins and pesticides in our crappy environment. So fiber, protein, and fat, I think, are really where I start. We can dive into fine tuning that a lot more based on each patient. I also recommend sometimes, meal prep companies, or how can we, batch food so it's easy for you instead of not eating or going through, drive-throughs or eating out all the time where you're more exposed to inflammatory foods, sea oils, processed foods that, you wouldn't get otherwise if you were having control of the food in your house. So yeah, it sounds easy, but again, you don't know what you don't know. And none of us were really taught this in school. And I think this is why we have such a epidemic now of, food. And like we just talked about, there's so many things that are addicting, and, you see the commercials and you're like, that looks good, or that's cheap, I'm going to buy it, it's on sale. And it's like, well, you're not really fueling your body with good foods. Now, everything in moderation. I'm not perfect. I'll go have pizza. I have French fries. It's all in moderation. So I like to, I live probably a 90-10, maybe 95-5. Like, I'm pretty clean now, but I'll go out and have, bad food, or I'll have a cheat day, and that's okay. Like, if you do have that, that's great. We just don't want to make it a regular thing.
I know that you both are really keen, and this is the area of study that you are doing is around muscles. Now, Luke and I are biohacking as much as we can. I know that's a really trendy term right now, but what we really mean by that is we're trying to defy time if we can at this age. So what are you finding out about the importance of muscle in health? Because we know it's a very hot topic online at the moment, and the discovery of the importance of muscle and maintaining good muscle for longevity and quality of life. What have you both discovered around that? Let's go to Adam first.
That's a great question. I think one thing I want to say is that previously, the sort of accepted stigma, I'll use the term stigma just loosely, previously, that like aerobic activity is really important for, your respiratory system, overall cardiovascular system, reducing comorbidities, all-cause mortality rates. That isn't necessarily false. We do have a lot of research, but we've sort of like put resistance training to the side and like muscle growth over periods of time as we continue to age. And now we're finding how important it is to be training to continually grow muscle as we age, due to sarcopenia, issues with just arthritis over periods of time, issues with balance and falling over in old age, just issues of being able to move and have a healthy lifestyle functionally, being able to get up and go, to sit down properly for everyday activities. So I think that there is a shift that's happening within research and maybe in sort of fitness pop culture, I like to say, that emphasis on incorporating both aspects of like aerobic training, which is good for many sort of overall fitness markers for your heart and everything I previously mentioned, but also resistance training to ensure that you're able to get up and go, right? Because strength, having a good amount of muscle and strength later on in life, right, is going to contribute to a better overall quality of life, outside of everything else. We're big on muscle growth here in our lab, and pushing it forward as much as we possibly can. I think that a lot of research will continue to come out sort of in support of that, or maybe not as in support overall when it comes to that, but it's interesting to see that shift over sort of a period of time.
One of the things that I've tried to do is cut sugar out of things like coffee. And what I've been doing is I've actually developed a bit of a trick, and that is to say that if I've got milk in the coffee, there's actually enough sugar or sweetness within the milk, and that I'm convincing myself that the coffee is now sweet enough because it's got the sweetness from the sugar. And I've actually kind of telling myself that because I know I wanted a little bit of sugar. I mean, my backstory really is when 3 years ago I was having 5 sugars in a cup of a drive-through, and I remember Naveed saying to me, "You've got to stop having 5 sugars in coffee because it's that sweet and bitter, isn't it?" And it was trying to balance that. Actually, before, also the other thing I was going to also say is that I was keen to hear that before we came on air, there was that you mentioned about cycling, and I used to race a bicycle, and there's always that challenge, isn't there, on a bike where you're trying to fuel efficiently and what you should be eating. And I know some of the professional cyclists talk about coconut oil. What are your sort of views, and how are you sort of managing your feeding, as it were, on a bicycle?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not really, cycling to the level of an elite athlete. For me, it's about 15 minutes into work and a quick race into work, a quick race out. But every weekend we go, with friends, we do like 20, 30 miles, and we'll stop for a coffee and stuff, So when I have done long, 80 miles, or so as an attack, fortunate to have done some of those things. And there, clearly, you do need sugar because, you're burning up so many calories, and you know what the athletes do, they take those little pockets. So, but then they're obviously burning it off immediately. So it's not, and let's be honest, if I cut to the chase, diabetes, our unhealth and weight isn't just to do with refined sugar. It's sugar. Sugar comes in lots of tasty stuff like chocolates and cakes, but it also brings with it lots of fat.
Yeah.
And the combination of refined sugar and fat is what puts on weight and in excess. So the key concept for people is, as part of the journey to cut sugar, you want them to gravitate towards better quality foods, trying to maybe bring in one piece of fruit into their diet if they're not eating fruit. Maybe take an apple, maybe a banana, get, a tangerine, a few grapes. It doesn't really matter. And then with an evening meal, to have less carbs that, for example, potatoes rapidly turn into sugar. Potatoes should not be one of our 5 a day. They're not one of our 5 a day, in fact, because, and white bread rapidly turns into sugar in the body. So it's having those mindsets of having, maybe I should have less, refined carbs, and if I have some salad in my plate in the evening meal, and get used to trying to eat some either cucumber or tomato or pepper or onions or whatever, or lettuce or cabbage, whatever people find, a third of their plate or half their plate should be those things. That means you'll eat less of the pasta or the potatoes. That then means that you're shifting that balance towards a bit more fiber, a less sugar, a less fat. Yeah. And even a 5% shift in that might be enough to stop people putting on weight. And remember, fiber is the gut's lubricant. It keeps the gut healthy, better microbiome, whatever, if you believe that kind of stuff. I'm not fully convinced yet, but I think it may well be true. So, those are the things. The quality of the fuel that we eat dictates the quality of the health of our blood vessels, our pumps, pipes, organs, and our systems inside. And that's the reality.
That's amazing. Such actionable steps. Yes.
And one thing I would say, Nabila, I do lots of work on drugs, statins, blood pressure. But the more I've done research, stepping back, I think we've underestimated the impact of diet and lifestyle and activity on outcomes. Yeah. Because we can't do those trials really easily, we tend to put that evidence in, and lots of clinicians put lip service to it because it's easy for them to prescribe a statin or a blood pressure. But actually, wait a second, blood pressure, there's several things affect blood pressure: salt, activity, weight, and alcohol, as an example, that we can change. But the point being, we have underestimated, and as part of your podcast, getting people to think about the sugar intake as part of that, then to think about their other diet aspects, and giving them really small, simple, sustainable changes that people can make is the way that we should be, the direction of travel we should be trying to go.
That's brilliant. Tell us what we're all now thinking, oh my goodness, I have to revisit my entire life. What do I do? Do I still want my teeth and some sweet food? What can we do about it, Dr. Nathan? This is a big revelation to us.
Well, I think it comes back to what your objective is, and it's really eliminating sugar, because sugar is a toxin. It's a poison. sugar foods and sugar in the mouth completely disrupt this microbiome, this healthy microbiome. It lowers the pH of the saliva, allows for the colonization of caries-causing bacteria, gingival bacteria that's causing periodontal disease, gingivitis, and cavities. So number one, just by eliminating sugar, then we restore kind of a healthy microbiome. And then number two, we have to do the nasal breathing. Mouth breathing and oxygenating the oral cavity completely changes the microbiome and leads to a lower pH, acidic saliva, which allows for the colonization of this. So I'm a big fan of mouth taping if you're a mouth breather at night to maintain a healthy microbiome. And then as we talked about, just get rid of fluoride, get rid of mouthwash, use a fluoride-free toothpaste. And now also what we've integrated into this is this nitric oxide molecule. So as long as you can maintain a healthy microbiome, then these bacteria produce nitric oxide, and then we swallow our saliva. Again, this is a nitric oxide producing cycle, and then we can help promote systemic nitric oxide production. So we've got products on the market that actually do that. And I think really what we're doing in the first half or first quarter of 2025 is we're launching a nitric oxide friendly toothpaste and a nitric oxide friendly mouth rinse. So for those people who want a mouth rinse that gives them fresh breath, but it's not destroying the microbiome, that's what we're doing. We're creating a nitric oxide friendly toothpaste that supports the microbiome, allows for the remineralization of teeth, killing the pathogens, and then supporting the non-pathogenic commensals. Because most people don't realize, and even infectious disease docs and dentists are just now realizing this, is that most pathogenic bacteria are sensitive to nitric oxide. The reason we get sick and we have these opportunistic bacterial infections, even viral infections, is because the body is compromising its ability to produce nitric oxide. If you can produce nitric oxide or expose these bacteria to nitric oxide, it selectively kills the pathogens and improves and enriches the diversity of the non-pathogenic. So this is going to be a game changer in oral care. It's going to be a game changer in public health. And I think it's going to lead to the eradication of high blood pressure and hopefully slow down this cardiovascular disease, which today still remains the number one killer of men and women worldwide.
Tell us about your passion for intermittent fasting and how did you come to discover that this is such a great thing for our health?
Well, my story is really long, probably like most listeners and probably like yours, but basically, I struggled with my weight for a lot of years, right? And that's such a familiar story. We grow up, we start our first diet at whatever time that is, and then that begins the cycle of on again, off again, and the weight yo-yo. Once you go down, then you go back up, then you go down, then you go back up, you're officially on that yo-yo. And so I just kept yo-yoing really higher and higher over the years. I had my sons in 1998 and 1999. And it was really after my second child was born that I found that my weight was suddenly higher and I couldn't do anything about it. So that's when the diets got a little more extreme and a little crazier over the years. But I'm a smart person and I was competent in, it felt like all the areas of my life, but I just couldn't get a handle on my weight. So I would go to the Amazon, what weight loss section and see what was out there, or I would go to my local Barnes and Noble and peruse the books on weight loss, and I would say, what am I going to try now? And so I was really just, going from diet to diet and plan to plan. And, I could lose some weight or even a great deal of weight, depending on what I did, but it always came back because nothing was sustainable. So I actually first came across intermittent fasting probably some point around 2009. But at that time, not very much was understood about it. And there were very few resources about it. And the advice, looking back now, we know some of that advice was a little sketchy. But, I would dabble in it here and there because as soon as I heard about the ideas of intermittent fasting, I was like, this just makes so much sense. You're not eating, then you're eating. It's like that natural boundary for you're eating or not. And I would try, but I didn't understand about being metabolically flexible or being fat adapted or, how your body needed to adapt to intermittent fasting. So I dabbled and it never stuck because first of all, I wasn't fasting clean.
which I can get into a little bit later, but I also wasn't giving it time. So it never stuck. So fast forward to 2014, we went on a family cruise, and I had been, I'd really given up. In about 2012, I gave up and just said, forget it, I'm going to be overweight. And we went on this family cruise, and I hadn't been weighing. I just wearing my stretchy clothes, but I saw the photos from that cruise, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's me. And when I got home, I pulled my scale down and I got on it, and I saw 210 pounds. And I'm 5'5", so I was solidly in the obese category and over 200 pounds, which that just felt like a threshold I never wanted to cross. And so I was like, well, this is it. So then I decided I really needed to take control of this once and for all. And I'd like to say that's the day I started intermittent fasting and lived happily ever after, but it isn't. I took my whole convoluted story in the appendix of my book, Delay Don't Deny. But I went to the crash diet, right? Straight for what's going to give me quick weight loss. And of course, you know how that works out. But then over that summer of 2014, I was like, I'm so tired. I'm feeling like I'm on these crash diets just to regain the weight. So I'm looking for a lifestyle. So at that time, I started keto the summer of 2014. And I did keto religiously the entire summer of 2014. And I lost 0 pounds. And I felt awful. Keto is not for me, spoiler alert. But, when it was time to go back to school, I was a school teacher. I taught school for 28 years. When it was time to go back to school in the fall, I was like, well, there is no way. Keto, first of all, it isn't working. And I also don't like it. And also, I don't have time to fool with this because I'm busy. I have children. I have to get up and go to work. I don't have time to be making all these special keto meals or not eating whatever's around. And so then I looked back in my memory and remembered intermittent fasting. So in about August of 2014, I reintroduced carbs, started intermittent fasting, and I never quit. And I went on to lose 80 pounds that I have kept off ever since. And so I have now been doing intermittent fasting for over 10 years without quitting.
Brilliant.
And I lost all the weight I wanted to lose. And I've kept it off even as I've gone through menopause, and I'm now 55. So there's my story in a nutshell.